Welcome back to 630 Point of View. Tonight in the Hot Box, play-by-play for NDSU, which all the games obviously were on Valley News Live this year. Brian Shawn. Brian, thanks for being here. Welcome back to Fargo. Let's get right to the good stuff. I think the most important question I can ask you tonight, how was the party Saturday night in Frisco?
I unfortunately didn't get a chance to experience it. I think I had to be at the airport at like, I can't remember. I had to be at the airport at like 4 a.m.
Your wife's watching, right? That's why you're saying that?
Yeah, and my
Okay,
wife
good.
is watching back home too. But no, it was kind of an early morning for us. So we just stayed and watched the Vikings game, had some dinner, and then that was pretty much it.
Again, thanks for the great job you did this year in the play-by-play. You were outstanding. Knowing football the way you do and seeing it live, it's always a different perspective, if you will, than seeing it through the lens. So tell us about what it was like being there live. What are the things that really jumped out to you that maybe we didn't see through the cameras?
You know, I think the biggest thing I noticed was just the adjustments that the coaches made at halftime. I know we're going to get into that a little bit, but I think the fan base, the fact that it was about 70 to 75% NDSU fans compared to Sam Houston fans, that was very, very evident. I think when you were in the stadium, it was much louder. I think it felt much more like a home game. And I think the people of Fargo have made this such an experience now that it's hard to, it's almost like Fargo South, you know what I mean? That's just the way it feels down there, and I think that was a huge advantage, and certainly the Pep Fest on Friday really got that whole thing started.
So talk to me about that. I mean, Sam Houston State is, what, 3 hours away from Frisco. Did you get a chance to talk to some of their fans, and what's the deal? Is it because you've got UT and Texas A&M and all those schools around there that Sam Houston State's sort of the redheaded stepchild?
Yeah, I don't know what the deal was. I was a little bit surprised myself. I mean, even on social media sites, Sam Houston was saying, hey, we still got tickets available. Go to bearcast.com, wherever it is, to get seats because we have tickets available. And it's like, you're still trying to get people to fill seats in that stadium from Sam Houston, again, making the short drive. I'm not sure what the deal was. I was a little bit surprised because they don't draw terrible for home games. But it must have been something about going that day that just didn't click with them. I really can't explain it.
I want to go inside the locker room at halftime. Clearly, the first half and the second half were two entirely different games. Do you know what Coach Bull said to the team at halftime?
You know, I don't know what he said. I was told it wasn't anything outrageous or crazy. I think it was one of those things where he was subdued and said, okay, let's make these adjustments and these adjustments. And I think Brent Vigen and Chris Kleiman, they made the adjustments they need to, and I think it really confused Sam Houston, especially what NDSU did offensively. I think that, to me, was the biggest adjustment in the game. Brent Vigen ran a lot of that jet motion where they bring the wide receiver streaking across, and Ryan Smith had some carries, but they ran everything off that. Some misdirection, some stuff off tackle. They didn't really attack the A-gap as much as they usually do in the middle because Sam Houston, their defensive line splits were so tight that they weren't able to protect the edges at all very well, and NDSU certainly took advantage of that.
And not only that, but they always had the 8 guys in the box. So I'm sure they're thinking, hey, let's get Ryan Smith outside, Crockett or Jury, and make some things happen. What makes this coaching staff, and one of the things that I thought was really impressive throughout the season is those halftime adjustments, and that's not, doesn't get talked a lot about, but every single game, it seems like, except for Indiana State, they just would take it to these guys in the second half. What makes this staff so good at it?
I think their experience, and I think knowing what their players do and don't do well, but I think they're quick to recognize what teams are trying to do against them, because NDSU, when you look at them on film, man, they're not doing anything real crazy. I mean, they're just pretty much lining up and hitting you, and sometimes teams will, you know, over pursue and do some things, you know, in their adjustments to try to take certain things away. And NDSU, the coaching staff in particular at halftime, recognizes that and say, okay, we can get this, this, and this now because here's what they're doing. For whatever reason, Sam Houston State could not get their run fit set up in the second half, and it was 12, 20, 25, 30-yard runs pretty much all throughout the second half.
Well, and you could tell the QB Bell didn't like getting hit in the second half. I mean, he definitely had the jumpy feet. Speaking about QBs, Brock Jensen gets the MVP. He's got 3 rushing touchdowns. He ended up going 9 for 16 for 115 yards. As a former quarterback, I tip my hat to Brock. He's a winner. And do you think that performance should have gotten him the MVP?
0 turnovers. Brian Bell, 3 interceptions. To me, it's all about a guy that takes care of the football and makes plays when he needs to make plays. Is it always the most pretty thing with Brock? Not always. But I mean, that 20-yard touchdown run was something pretty special. That, you know, when getting rid of the football in certain situations, avoiding the blitz, able to move around the pocket a little bit. You know, it's not always going to be one of those things where the numbers are going to look real flashy, but he doesn't make bad decisions. At least he hasn't in the playoffs in terms of throwing the football to somebody else and making bad decisions. And I really thought that was the difference in the game.
Talking about next year, I think everyone's going to be talking about three-peat. Is that a probability?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. When you have 19 starters back from a team that wins a national title, certainly losing Joe Lund, Andre Martin, and Garrett Brune will hurt. But you get Colton Hegel back from injury and Levon Perry back from injury. That wasn't talked about a lot either. they might have had some guys in that defense that maybe even overachieved a little bit, filling in for those guys. And certainly, I think getting Brian Shepard back was very important for the championship game. He was second on the team in tackles with 9.
I mean, it's exciting to see the national championship club, obviously, but then you look at next year. We start with Kansas State, who was in the top 5 this year. Montana State at home. You've got South Dakota at South Dakota State. Northern Iowa, going to be an amazing season next year. The one thing I want you to start to focus on and talk to us about is recruiting. A game like this, you know you're probably going to three-peat. You're on ESPN. Talk about the impact it has on recruiting, and who do you know right now that they are hot on, that they might be able to get away from a Big Ten school?
You know, it's hard to gauge because they lost so few seniors that they can only offer so many scholarships. You only have 7 guys, you know, that are in your senior class. There's only so many scholarships you can give out. The junior class so large, I think in the 30s right now in terms of the seniors coming back for next season. I think the recruiting thing is kind of a double-edged sword because you're playing and you're game planning, you're doing all these things. You're not out on the road. Maybe some of those other teams have been for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, but you know Coach Bowl picked up that fun of the game, was like, yeah, did you see that on ESPN? All right,
Yeah.
we'll see you next year.
But, you know, and you're assuming some guys that maybe in this last month, what kind of guys that have not committed to a program that you can get. But I think what they've done is they've started with the offensive and defensive lines, and you saw that in particular on the defensive line for NDSU. They rotate 7, 8 guys. Sam Houston rotated nobody. If you don't have depth and you're not physical, I don't think you can win in the FCS. And NDSU's found the ingredients in the project to do that.
Brian, great to see
Yeah,
you
good to
again.
see you
Thanks for
too.
the hard work.
Absolutely.
And excited for what you're going to be doing for us next year. Stay close. Where does Senator Hoeven and Senator-elect, now Senator Heidi Heitkamp, stand on gun control? You might be shocked when you contrast these two senators together. As always, be sure and join our conversation. Go to 630POV.com. We'll talk about football later in the show. If you want, let us know who you think is going to win between the Crimson Tide and the Irish tonight. And will the Bison three-peat? We'll be right back.